So I'd like to welcome everyone who's here. I want to welcome my dad who's here in person, my mom from 21 Jefferson Ave in Sharon. I want to welcome my grandma from Weathersfield, and I want to welcome Eli Melech from the Five Towns. So I'd like to thank a couple of people before we start. One, I want to thank Rabbi Nathaniel Katzenstein, Rabbi Katzenstein's son, for filling me in with a lot of the hanhagos, the ways of acting and being of his father, Rabbi Katzenstein Mar Yeshiva, that we'll be speaking about today. I want to thank my chaver Habacher Eli Miller from Yeshiva's Darchei Torah for helping me prepare this year. And I want to thank Eli Melech for giving me over many of the Rabbi Katzenstein shmuzin that we're going to be quoting from today. So in the first segment, we'll talk about Be'ez Hashem is cleaning for Pesach. Right now, we're holding by Sunday, the day before Pesach, and we're in the middle of getting ready for Pesach. Some of us are holding by chametz umatzah, that we have some chametz still going on and some preparations for Pesach going on. And while we're getting ready for Pesach, I want to share a mahalach, an approach from a couple of Rebbeim. The one I saw specifically spoke about cleaning for Pesach is Rabbi Menachem Weissman, the head of school at PHDS, Providence B'day School, where I attended through 4th grade. And Rabbi Katzenstein has spoken about this in a different context, in the context of the milas as part of the pre. So I'll begin by saying Baruch Chavetz Chaim on what we say in the Siyum. In the Siyum we say, Anu Amelim Behem Amelim, that we are Amel, we are deeply engrossed, and they are deeply engrossed. So what we say at the Siyum is Heim Amelim Be'in Makabim Sachar, that the people of the world are engrossed in what they're doing, but they don't receive reward. And the Chavetz Chaim explains that a person in the world only gets paid, only receives reward if they actually produce an end product. Meaning that if a farmer is growing crops, so if he grows crops successfully and he can sell them to the supermarkets, then he'll get paid. But if the crops don't grow and he doesn't have anything to sell, then he won't get paid. That's the way it is in the world. But in the Torah, it's different. We say in the Siyum, Anu Amelim Umekabim Sachar, which the Chavetz Chaim says is that we work hard and we get reward. Meaning that even if we don't end up with any tangible result or final end product, we still receive reward. For example, if a person is learning Gemara and he goes over the Gemara once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and he tries to understand it, he tries his best, he speaks with the Be'im, and ultimately he doesn't understand it, he still gets reward for all the effort that he put in trying to understand the Gemara. And with regards to Pesach, certainly it's important to have an end product of kosher for Pesach home. The result is important. But what's also important is the effort and the amelos, the efforts that we put forth into cleaning for Pesach, moving out the chametz items, bringing in the kosher for Pesach items, shopping for kosher for Pesach items. All of the effort and preparations we do for Pesach is an essential part of the process. We shouldn't think that it's better that if we could just push the button and automatically we would have kosher for Pesach in our kitchens. The Fakir, Rabbi Reisman was speaking out, the best approach is that we put forth our effort, and like Rabbi Katzenstein says, the amelos is part of the pre, that the hard work and the toil that we put in is part of the fruit being a kosher for Pesach home, and all of the efforts that we put in is part of that fruit. One of my Rebbeim from Muncie, Rabbi Daniel Fag, told me a maisa, a story from Rabbi Tzion of Babov, the Babov Rebbe, who put out a sefer called the Kedushas Tzion. Babov Rebbe lived in the early 1900s. The maisa, the story, is with one of the Rothschilds who lived in Frankfurt. we're maybe familiar, the Rothschilds were a family of very wealthy individuals, and this particular Rothschild, Rabbi Feig was not sure his first name, was a very Erlich Yid. He always tried his best to fulfill Ratzon Hashem, to do the will of Hashem. And one time, he was hosting the Baba Rebbe. The Baba Rebbe came to visit him in Frankfurt. And the Rothschild was sharing with the Baba Rebbe some of his chumras, his halachic stringencies that he took upon himself. And one of them that the Rothschild thought would astound the Baba Rebbe was his special kosher for Pesach home. The Rothschild had a special house that he built, and he only lived in it on Pesach. That way he could be sure that it was completely chametz free. The Rothschild thought the Baba Rebbe would be amazed with this. But in fact, the Baba Rebbe was not so pleased with this arrangement. The Baba Rebbe felt that Pesach is to remove the chametz and insert the kosher for Pesach. That's what Pesach is about. It's about removing the chametz and inserting the kosher for Pesach. Not that there should just be automatically kosher for Pesach instantaneously, automatically, but that we should perform the effort of taking out the chametz and inserting kosher for Pesach. One of the Vartlach Marishiva, Rabbi Katzin, spoke out in the past year was a vart on the Mishnah Avos, which you may be familiar with. The Mishnah says different attributes that one should be like in Avodas Hashem, and then one of them is Kal Kenesher, light as an eagle. Rabbi Katzin says that light as an eagle means our Avodas Hashem, our service of Hashem, should be as effortless and smooth as an eagle or a bird gliding through the air. So the question is, how could Pesach be Kal Kenesher when we're physically doing so many tasks of schlepping, carrying, purchasing, cleaning? How could Pesach be under the prism of Kal Kenesher, light as an eagle? So one aspect is knowing what is required for us to clean and what is not. Rabbi Miller, our Rav from Sharon, he told me this a year or two ago before, but he recently told me this as well. A Maisa, that one time he went into the office of Rabbi Heinemann, his Rav, the Rav of Baltimore, and Rabbi Miller asked Rabbi Heinemann, how would Rabbi Heinemann clean this room for Pesach? This was a room that Rabbi Heinemann did not plan on eating in over the course of Pesach. This was his office. And first I'll demonstrate for the people who are in person and on Zoom. This is what Rabbi Heinemann went like. Meaning that Rabbi Heinemann stayed in his chair and he visually looked around the room. He looked to his left, in front of him, to the right, behind him, and he saw there were no large noticeable pieces of chametz, and he paskined that the room was kosher for Pesach. That is the extent of cleaning for Pesach that a person needs to do in a room that he does not plan on eating in over Pesach. Rabbi Miller told me though that for a room that we bring in chametz over Pesach, like a kitchen that we prepare food, dining room that we eat food in, there we're concerned even for a small crumb of chametz that potentially enter our food, and therefore we wipe it down with some sort of soapy solution, therefore renders the chametz not royal achilas kalav, and it loses its chametz properties, and therefore even if it would get into our food, it's not a violation of Pesach. So of course, if we have large pieces of chametz, it's important to bring that out of our domain, meaning our main living area, and put it in some sort of side area. And if we're going to sell it to a guy, Rabbi Miller supports selling chametz chamer, selling complete chametz, bread, crackers, cookies to a non-Jew. So we put that in a side area, and we won't be tempted to eat it. We sell it to a non-Jew, and wipe down with a soapy solution the areas that the different surfaces like the cabinets, refrigerator handles, tables, and some people have the minhag to cover the tables. And then the halacha, and then halachically we fulfilled what we need to do for Pesach. The Rav who I learned Hilchos Pesach by, Rabbi Chaim Shabbos from Muncie, he said a vart from one of the Ger Rebbes on a lashon we say in davening on the festivals, right? Like Grandma, your mother used to say the prayers on the festival, so it could be she said some of these words. The words are Timidim Kesidram Umusafim Kilchasam. That the Timidim, the twice daily offerings that we bring throughout the year, are brought according to their order, and the Musaf, the additional offerings, like we're familiar that on Shabbos and festivals, there are additional korbanos that are brought. The additional ones are brought according to their rules. So the Ger Rebbe says that first comes Timidim Kesidram. First comes the consistent ones, the basic requirements, that fulfill the basic halacha. If we've done that, then if we want to do some other chumras or halachic stringencies or things that help us maybe feel more the flavor of Pesach, then as long as we've done the basic requirements, then if we still have more interest and energy, we can do some of the more advanced measures. But still, even if we do the basic requirement, cleaning for Pesach is a lot of work. So coming back to answer the question we said earlier, how could Pesach be kal kanesher? How could Pesach be light as an eagle when we're schlepping, carrying, cleaning? So Rabbi Katzin says that if we view avodas Hashem as gold, like we say in davening, hanachamad mizav mipazra, at least that's by limud Torah, but if we view that is by mitzvahs also, that keeping a mitzvah of Hashem is gold, it's worth so much to us, then we'll lighten the load of what may seem to be a heavy burden. It'll seem much lighter in our eyes because we'll be carrying bundles of gold, something that's worth so much to us, to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Hashem, to be able to bring Hashem into our lives, and to be a servant of Hashem. If we truly value that, then all of the physical work that we do for Pesach will seem less. Rabbi Katzin told me that sometimes he drives from the 5 towns to Lakewood, which is about 2 hours, and spends 20 minutes at a chasana, at a wedding. And Rabbi Katzin says it's the only way he can do it is because he truly values those 20 minutes of simchas chas mekala, of making the bride and groom rejoice at a wedding. He values those 20 minutes so much that it overshadows the 4 hours of transportation. If we view the opportunity to come closer with Hashem, to use our bodies in service of Hashem by cleaning for Pesach, then we'll be able to view Pesach as a lighter load. Okay, in the next segment, I'd like to talk about a memra, a statement that Rabbi Katzin says when he checks for chametz. Rav David Nesanel, his son, told me that when Rabbi Katzin checks for chametz, he says that right now we are searching for the Yetzer Hara. We are looking out to see ways that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, has crept into our lives over the past year. We're trying to identify it and either get rid of it or sublimate it, use it for the good. One of the rebbeim of the yeshiva that took over for my first yeshiva, Or Sameach, the new yeshiva is called Torah David in Muncie. One of the rebbeim, his name is Rabbi Gabi Fried, spoke out on Parshas Azriel that there are really 3 levels of Yetzer Hara. One comes from our personal midos, our personal ways of being, our inner character traits, things that stem from ourselves. Like, for example, if a person has a tendency of perhaps being negative or critical, so it's up to him to try to work on that and maybe try to notice one positive thing about someone else per day, because that's a midah that stems from him. That's the most central midah to one. That the midas that come from a person himself are the most crucial to the way he acts. Second most important is what one has interactions with his family, friends, co-workers, fellow Bachrim in Yeshiva. A person potentially could pick up some negative hashpos, negative influences from other people. For example, if there's a person in someone's orbit who uses a certain word that's beneath our sensitivities, it can be a challenge to avoid ourselves not repeating that word. But if we're aware that there is some element in our orbit that's not the most healthy for us, we could, if it's possible, either distance ourselves from that person or at least be aware and try to put up a strong guard against having that negative influence come into ourselves. And the third most important is what we get at large from being part of society, being part of America. Some of the influences we get through osmosis. Rabbi Katzin specifically spoke about a certain phrase that some people in the world say, which is, don't sweat the small stuff. Some people say, don't sweat the small stuff. Rabbi Katzin says, this phrase is the total opposite of the Torah. A big person is into small things. A big person cares about small details. So if we hear a phrase like this from the world, it's up to us to try to not incorporate this into our lives and instead retain the Torah approach of taking care of big things as well as small things. And the truth is, these are some of what we've just spoken about is what is meant in the Haggadah when we say in Cholach Ma'anya, at the beginning of Magid, we say Hashta Avdei, now we are enslaved. So last week I was at the Boston Kollel. I asked some of the Talmidei Chacham of Boston, in what way are we enslaved? What's the Baal HaHaggadah, the author of the Haggadah, coming to relate to us by saying in the present tense that we are presently enslaved? So I got some of these answers from a few of the Rebbeim. A couple of the Rebbeim from YOY, Yeshivas Or Yisrael in Boston, the Menal Rabbi Uri Feldman, one of the Rebbeim, Rabbi Yaakov Ruzansky, as well as the 6th grade Rabbi at Torah Academy, Rabbi Yecheskel Nilman. They both told me about the above, that the Yetzer Hara comes from the person himself as well as from our surroundings. So when we clean for chametz, in addition to getting rid of the bread and crackers and cookies that we have in our house, it's also worthwhile that we take some amount of time to ponder if there are any of these three areas, either our personal midos, our personal ways of being, those that come from family, friends, co-workers, Bachrim in Yeshiva, or society or America at large, if there's anything from that we need to identify and either get rid of or use for the good, this is a worthwhile time of year to spend some time thinking about that. Does anyone have any examples of any of these three levels that we may have in our lives? My mother was just saying an example that like if a person is concerned if a certain product, which is not chametz gamor, but if it may have some small semblance of chametz or kitnius, to be concerned about such a presence of a substance that we don't want to consume on Pesach is an example of caring about the small things. My mother's saying another possible influence we might have is if we hear Yetzer Hara. That's why the Chafetz Chaim specifically has rules against believing Lashon Hara. A person in general is not obligated to 100% view Lashon Hara as untrue, but on the other hand, he should not accept the report as being true without having more first-hand verification. Ali Malach, do you have anything to add on that topic about being Mekabel Lashon Hara? Ali Malach is saying this is a big topic. I'm sure this is well discussed in Sefer Chafetz Chaim, but the general principle is that if a person hears Lashon Hara spoken about his friend, he should not accept it as being verified to be true. If there are situations of litowelas or a person is being warned about someone's going to take advantage of him, he's allowed to be cautious about it, but he still shouldn't believe it 100% to be true. Now I'd like to share a question that I have spent time thinking about. During davening on the festivals, we say that Pesach, and also in Kiddush, we say that Pesach is Zman Cheruseinu, the time of our freedom. So, given that, like we spoke about before, that getting ready for Pesach is an important part of the Pesach experience, so how is the effort of Pesach, how is that freedom? How is schlepping bags up and down, shopping, scrubbing, vacuuming the carpet, which is a reasonable practice, vacuuming the carpet in a room that we're going to be eating in. So how is involving all of these efforts, which involve so much, every bone in our body gets involved, how is it freedom to be involving in these activities for days or weeks before Pesach? Another question is, how is fulfilling, like the Gemara says, 64 mitzvahs at the Seder, including different foods we eat, leaning, washing our hands, making brachas. How is fulfilling 64 mitzvahs, 64 impositions on our life, how is that freedom? L'chara, if we would want to experience freedom, we would sit back and relax and enjoy the evening. Why is doing 64 mitzvahs, how is that freedom? Another question, like we say in the Mishnah Avos, Mishnah Vav, Parak Vav, Mishnah Beis, Ein l'chad ben chorin ela misha osek b'salmud Torah. There's no ben chorin except for someone who's involved in Torah study. There's no free person except for a person who's involved in Torah study. So this is another pella. How is this possible? The studying Torah is an imposition on one's time, on one's mental abilities. If a person absorbs the messages of the Torah, it can affect his whole life. How is studying Torah an element of freedom? Maybe glancing through the newspaper, seeing what finds interesting or stimulating, maybe that's freedom. But how is Bav Metzia, how is Shnayim Buchsa Metalis, how is that freedom? Does anyone have any answers to this question?
Because we have a choice, and we're choosing to put the effort in to prepare for the holiday. We're choosing to follow the commandments and study the Torah. We can sit back, as you say, and not do it. We're choosing it, and in that way, it's a freedom. The choice, we're given a choice by God, how we want to spend our time.
Okay, thank you. So last year in the Shabbos Hagadol Drasha, Rabbi Katzin said over the following about Chayris. Rabbi Katzin's definition of Chayris, of freedom, is devoting a person's whole being to Ratzon Hashem, to the will of Hashem. Rabbi Katzin says that a free person is someone who devotes their whole being to the will of Hashem. So I think in order to explain this, we can understand that a person of the Torah, someone who's committed to learning the Torah and living the Torah, is much limited or maybe completely free from distractions. He's able to focus on his mission as being like the Mesilas Yesharim says, like a part of Hashem's army or team or orchestra. If a person is committed to the Torah, then he's going to be able to fulfill what his mission in life is. And while he's fulfilling his mission in life, that means he's free to do that. He's not being pulled this way or that way by other distractions, Tanugi Olam Hazeh, by various things that this world has to offer. A person who's truly free is someone who's free to fulfill what Hashem put him on this world for, to fulfill that unique mission that he had. And by learning the Torah and living the Torah, a person can be committed to this mission. Now, on the opposite is, like my mother was telling me over Shabbos, is a term called chafshi. The way Rabbi Katzin defines it is that chafshi is freedom without responsibilities. Just being free to do what you want. Being on vacation, that's chafshi. And we don't find in the Torah Pesach is described as a holiday of chafshi. Pesach is described as a holiday of cheres, freedom with responsibilities, being able to carry out Ratzon Hashem. In Mitzrayim, when we were in Egypt, we were physically and spiritually enslaved. Physically, we were working day and night, and spiritually, we were in a place that was shtufei zimah, that was filled with immorality. And in leaving Mitzrayim, we left those shibudim, those obligations, and we took steps towards achieving the cheres, the freedom of the Torah. On Pesach, we're defining ourselves as free people. And how are we free? Because we're free to serve Hashem. We're no longer Avdei Paro. We're not in Pharaoh's orbit. We're able to serve Hashem. With regards to the physical prep we did for Pesach, that shows how we serve Hashem with our bodies. Like we say in Nishmas, Kol Atzmosai Tomarna. All of my bones will say. I was really thinking about this phrase when I was carrying a box last week, and every muscle in my body was working to carry that box. Kol Atzmosai Tomarna. All of my bones will praise Hashem. With regards to the money that we spent on Pesach, everyone knows that Pesach is a very significant expense. When we spend money on Pesach, we remember what's the reason that we have money. Like we spoke about in the shir about working, we earn money so that we can spend it on mitzvos, on daily living, taking care of ourselves, which Rabbi Miller says is a mitzvah to take care of oneself, and on giving tzedakah, and around this time of year especially, giving to poor people, help them afford matzahs. So therefore also a person who's learning the Torah, how is he a ben chorin? When a person learns the Torah, that one, if he's learning practical halachos, that's going to direct him how to fulfill his tafkid, how to carry out the mitzvos. And if he's learning Gemara, that trains him to think in the way of Hashem, then he's changing over his whole body, Taramach Iber the Mensch, and he's making himself a new person, and a person that's filled with the mission of the Torah. Cheres is a spiritual concept, as we've spoken about, but we bring it out physically to our bodies, so that our bodies can relate to it. That's one of the reasons why we drink the 4 cups of wine. That's why we set the table very nicely on Leil Seder. And that's why we lean to our left when we drink the 4 cups and we eat the matzah. Because we do these practices in order to train our bodies the body doesn't really understand these spiritual concepts, so we train our bodies how to understand what it means to be a free person by giving the body things that it enjoys. When Rabbi Katzin was speaking about cheres, he also said the following definition, that cheres is belief that everything Hashem does is for the good. An aspect of being a free person is belief that everything that Hashem does is for the good. There are many people who say that when Klal Yisrael said Shira, when we sang the song At the Sea, we recognize all of the hard times of slavery in Egypt as being for the good. We were able to have such a perspective once we crossed the Red Sea that everything that happened in Mitzrayim was for the good. So the question is, what good did the slavery do for us? So Rabbi Zalman Leff, one of the Rosh Kola in Boston, he said that he quoted me a lashon that Mitzrayim is the Kor HaBarzel. And Mitzrayim is the entity that causes the iron to become sharp. Our midas were sharpened, our attributes were sharpened in some way through our slavery. Specifically, I think one that Rashi highlights is Nosi B'ol Chaveiro. Rashi in Shemos Parakeh Pasuk Yudalid, Vayuku, the first one. Rashi speaks out how the Jews refused to strike other Jews, even though they themselves would get struck by the Egyptians, because they truly took the other Jews' plight as their own. So Nosi B'ol Chaveiro, taking one's plight of one's friend, is definitely one area we grew in Mitzrayim. On Leil Seder, we have the opportunity to view our life as chayris, to believe that everything is for the good. When we say Shachiyanu at the Seder, when we say Shachiyanu v'kiyamanu v'kiyanu lazman hazeh, that Hashem brought us to this time, we can reflect on the past year, the positive parts, the good times, the challenges, and to believe that in some way we are stronger, physically, spiritually, mentally. In some way we're better off for the experience that we had in the past year. Another point it's appropriate to reflect on is who was at our Seder this year, who was not at our Seder in 2020. We're at a different place. Rabbi Braun, my yeshiva from Monsey, he said the following part about slavery. He said, our role in Mitzrayim trained us how to follow rules. The fact that the taskmasters in Mitzrayim, they set upon certain rules for us and we learned how to follow them, that trained us to be able to follow Hashem's rules. Of course, the difference is that the taskmasters did not have our best interests in mind, whereas Hashem is, like the Mesilas Yesharim says at the beginning, is doing us the great tova, the great kindness of bringing us closer to his orbit, closer to his presence. I'll share a story for myself from high school that showed how a certain involvement that I was in trained me in a certain midah that I have used over the past several years. My friend Gedalia Fox, who Baruch Hashem is a chassan, I was once talking about him about some of my involvements in high school, and he told me as follows. He said that the fact that you were so involved in high school with the sports teams, with being a part of the Eagles, Eagle Pride, he said that experience trained you to be part of an entity that's larger than yourself. Because a person who's just going about his own life and just thinking about himself is much different than a person who's part of something bigger than himself, part of the values of Eagle Pride, like what Coach Morris instilled in everyone, to have Eagle Pride, to believe that I was contributing to something larger than myself, that I was helping out the other people on the team by writing articles, contributing to the town of Sharon, believing that I was part of an entity larger than myself. Gedalia Fields trained me to be able to be part of Klal Yisrael and to be able to realize that my avodas Hashem is not enough. I need other people as well. And like the Chovos HaLevavos says in Shar Achna, that a person realizes that Hashem is a larger entity and a person is a smaller entity. So to be part of Hashem's orbit in relation to Hashem, that a person is smaller than Hashem. So I got that training from being part of an entity that was bigger than me and being part of Eagle Pride. That was a major toelas amongst other benefits that I got from being in high school. Does anyone have any comments about the section of slavery? Rashi is speaking in general about the procedure that used to happen. That the Egyptian higher-ups would tell the Jewish middlemen that you need to make sure the Jewish workers produce enough straw. And if they don't, then we'll strike then if you don't, then we expect you, the Jewish middleman, to strike the Jewish workers. But the Jewish middlemen refused to strike the Jewish workers, and they themselves got struck by the Egyptian taskmasters.
Who got struck by the Egyptian taskmaster?
The Jewish middlemen.
When they took that hit rather than at their own.
Yeah, that was the Nosib ul Chaver that Rashi is speaking about.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, now we're going to get into the mitzvahs of the Seder. One of the practices we're familiar with is the 4 cups. The minig is those who are able to drink wine. Rabbi Miller says it's acceptable to drink grape juice if wine is not possible, or a person that certainly that a person has fulfilled this obligation if he drinks grape juice. It's also brought in halacha that it could be if a person drinks grape juice, but maybe have a little drop of the wine in the cup. One of the practices of the 4 cups, the way we paskin, Rabbi Miller told me it's a machlokes rishonim, but the way we paskin is that every person at the Seder needs to personally drink 4 cups of wine. We'll refer to it as wine just for sake of using one word. So every person needs to drink 4 cups of wine. But if we think to a procedure we do every Friday night at Kiddush, the halacha is only the person making Kiddush needs to drink the wine. There may be an inyan, a concept to other people to taste, but other people certainly do not need to drink a revius of wine. A revius is a certain measurement. So why is it different than Kiddush? How come at the Seder every person personally needs to drink 4 cups of wine? The sefer that I learned from Hilchos Pesach, Shloshim Kodem Achag, he brings from Chazal that Chazal enacted the 4 cups of wine connected the Gal Lashonos of Geula, the 4 statements of redemption that we had at the beginning of Parshas Va'era. The first one is, V'otzesi eschem mitachas sivlos Mitzrayim, and I will take you out from under the burdens of Egypt. 2, V'itzalti eschem me'avodasam, I will save you from your slavery. 3, V'ga'alti eschem bezor netu b'shvatim gedolim, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. And 4 is V'lakachti eschem li la'am, and I will take you for me as a people. These are the 4 statements that Hashem said at the beginning of Parshas Va'era of redemption, and we drink 4 cups to refer to each of these statements. So Chazal felt that we need to taste the Geula, these 4 expressions of redemption on our lips. It's not enough just for the leader of the Seder to understand this message, but every person at the Seder needs to personally experience tasting the redemption. And it comes out that we need to drink enough wine to internalize this. Just a sip is not, in the eyes of Chazal, is not sufficient to understand this message of redemption. We need to drink a revius, or a row revius, which we'll explain a little bit later. So Rabbi Miller told me that from a halachic perspective, the shiurim are what the Torah classifies as either eating or drinking. Meaning, eating is a kazayas, and drinking is a revius, or row revius. If a person eats or drinks less than this measurement, it's not considered as if he ate or drank. Therefore, in order that the Torah and Chazal set up mitzvahs of eating and drinking at the Seder, we need to eat or drink a quantity that's classified as eating or drinking. By dint of that, it's a certain amount. And another element is that the eating and drinking has to be within a certain zman. That eating has to be within Kedei Achilas Pras, which is between like 4 and 9 minutes to eat a kazayas. And drinking, Rov Revius, is Kedei Shtias Revius within about 30 seconds, which we'll speak about more later. I do want to say a story, a first-hand story Rabbi Miller told me this week. I never knew this before. We're familiar that wine is preferable, but grape juice a person is also yotzi. Rabbi Miller told me himself personally, he does not enjoy the taste of wine. and it makes him feel slightly unwell. But nonetheless, at the Seder, he tries to drink the first 2 cups of wine because he feels that drinking wine is the preferable way to fulfill the mitzvah of 4 cups. It's brought down that for women there's more grounds to drink grape juice. And that's in order to prevent the possibility of getting drunk. Fine, now as far as some particulars, how to fulfill the mitzvah of the 4 cups. So the basic halacha is that a person should fill the cup with a revius, which is about 3.3 ounces, and drink most of it, 1.7 ounces. If a person fills the cup with 3.3 ounces, drinks most of it, 1.7 ounces, and he drinks it within 30 seconds, 1.7 ounces is like 2 or 3 good sips. Drinks it straight within 30 seconds, person has fulfilled the mitzvah of 4 cups according to all opinions. If a person takes his time, up until 4 minutes, he may still be yotze. If a person delays. So that's for the basic halacha. The best way is to drink a full revius, which is 3.3 ounces, and to drink the entire cup. That's why some people use a small cup so that they can drink the whole cup and not have it be much more than a revius. But it's only the first 1.7 ounces, the first 2 or 3 good sips that needs to be drunk quickly. After that, the rest of the cup can be drunk at one's leisure. We're familiar that 4 cups are drunk beheseba, leaning. Rabbi Miller told me what is the proper approach for haseba. He said it's to prop some sort of either pillow or a second chair and lean against it in such a way that if that other item were to be removed, the person would topple over to some extent. The key with haseba is that a person's body should be supported by some other entity, not leaning in midair, but being supported by a pillow or another chair, leaning to one's left. It's brought in halacha that women are allowed to rely on, if a woman doesn't feel like getting herself a pillow, getting herself another chair, she can rely on the view of the Rav Yah, that she does not have to lean, that leaning bisman hazeh does not apply. But the Shoshim Yom says that if a woman does lean at the Seder, she is to be blessed. And he brings down the wives of 3 major players, the Chassam Sofer, the Chazon Ish, and the Stipler, all leaned at the Seder. So we see that women leaning at the Seder is definitely an accepted practice. Ali Malach is asking, where did I get the share of 3.3 ounces as a revius? That's a share from my Rav Rabbi Miller. He told me that they can rely on 3.3. But if the Seder is Friday night, then we have to be 4.4 for the first cup. Okay, the next section we'll talk about matzah. This is the section we'll conclude with. There's a mitzvah d'oraisa, a mitzvah from the Torah for both men and women to eat matzah. This is from the Pesach in Shmos, Parak Yud Beis, Pesach Yud Ches. Shmur matzah means matzah l'shma. That's what Rabbi Miller told me. That's what shmur matzah means. What's the item is being guarded? The matzah is being washed to make sure that it was made with the express purpose of being served at the first day of Pesach and eaten for the mitzvah. Not to eat the rest of Pesach, not to be sold in the supermarkets the rest of the year. Specifically, shmur matzah is to be eaten is made with the intent of it being eaten the first night of Pesach, first or second night for the mitzvah. For the rest of Pesach, it's enough to have kosher for Pesach matzahs under reliable hechsher, but does not need to be shmura for the day meals, the first 2 day meals, or Chol Hamoed, or the last days. My Rebbe wanted to tie it to me, my Rebbe wanted to tie it to me that if a person is going like the Gra, and he feels that there's a mitzvah kiyumis of eating matzah the whole Pesach, then he would need to eat shmur matzah the whole Pesach. Fine. So the pasuk in Devarim, Parak Tes Zayin, pasuk Gimel, says Ki v'chipazon yatzasam eretz Mitzrayim, Parshas Re'eh, that in haste we left Mitzrayim. So, what's the significance? The pasuk is emphasizing not just that we left Mitzrayim, but that we left Mitzrayim in haste, quickly. Like Rabbi Katzin has quoted the Memra, Yeshua Hashem Keharif Ayin. The salvations of Hashem happen at the blink of an eye. The Mesil Sharm brings down from Chazal that even if a sharp sword is at a person's neck, he should not be Mesiach Das, he should not give up hope from having Hashem's Rachamim, Hashem's mercy. When we discuss Rebbe Gamliel, when we say the statement from Rebbe Gamliel, the three things that we should mention at the Seder, it's worthwhile to think about different deliverances that Hashem has brought about in our lives. Just like Hashem sent us quickly out of Mitzrayim, think about ways that Hashem has helped us personally in giving us deliverances. With regards to matzah is important to eat mindfully. The matzah, the halacha is that a person should taste on his tongue the taste of the matzah, not just swallow it straight, but to actually taste what the matzah is like. And by mar, it's even more stringent. It's a requirement to taste the mar, to taste the bitterness. And in order to facilitate mindful eating, to make sure that we can focus on the taste of what we're eating, we avoid extraneous conversation from motzi matzah until korech. That means the whole time that we're eating the matzah, maror, and then preferably until through korech, the sandwich of matzah and maror, we're avoiding external conversation about different topics. At the beginning of the Seder, my father announces no travel, leisure, or politics until the main meal, meaning the main meal after all of the matzah and maror is eaten. So therefore, the matzah and the maror, as well as the whole Haggadah, can be conducted with focus. From a halachic perspective, the reason why we don't talk between al achilas matzah and maror and korech is because we want the bracha of al achilas matzah to cover korech without a hefsek. Now, in the concluding segment of matzah, I want to talk about the mitzvah of eating matzah to a kazayis. We've talked about how matzah is shmur matzah. We're starting the Seder after Tzesach L'Havim, once it's fully nighttime. And we're eating matzah after that point. Another requirement of matzah is eating a kazayis. It's hard to give over in words exactly what a kazayis is, but in my personal experience, a kazayis is about 4 to 5 minutes of continual eating with sips of water. If a person eats for about 4 to 5 minutes straight, then he will have eaten a kazayis. The fact of the matter is, a person could spend so much time getting ready for Pesach, all of the hachanos, getting ready, bat shmur matzah is sitting at the Seder, but ultimately if a person does not eat a kazayis, he has not fulfilled the Torah mitzvah of eating matzah at the Seder, of eating matzah on the first night of Pesach. And similarly, if a person takes longer than about 9 minutes to eat the kazayis, he also has not fulfilled his obligation for a man or woman. So I want to bring out this point, hopefully in a way that we can appreciate. Back when I was following basketball, there was a player named LeBron James. I recently spoke with one of the workers in Back Bay Station when I was on the way home from Boston Kollel, and his name is Jaimin, and he informed me that LeBron James is still playing. Back when I was following, LeBron James had a habit that he would play very well in the first 3 quarters, but in the 4th quarter, he would falter. He would lose some of his vigor. He wouldn't be at his best. I want to welcome my chavrusa, who we've been learning Hilchos Pesach together, Rabbi Adam Meir Schumann. Thank you for joining. So LeBron would do well in the first 3 quarters, but falter in the fourth quarter. So there was a joke that was told about LeBron. The joke was that LeBron James could not afford anything at the dollar store because he lacked the fourth quarter. LeBron could not afford anything at the dollar store. He lacked the fourth quarter. He had 3 quarters. He played well the first 3 quarters, but he didn't have the fourth quarter. If we complete the kazayas, if we eat a full kazayas, which I'm estimating is about 4 to 5 minutes of continual eating, then we will have completed the fourth quarter. We will be able to afford something at the dollar store. We will be able to cash in on, like Rabbi Katzin was saying earlier, is the gold of the mitzvah. And then we'll be able to answer up the other joke that was said about LeBron James. The other joke was, Apple has recently released a special edition LeBron James iPhone. The only problem is it has no ring. Because when I was following, LeBron James had not won any championship rings. So therefore Apple invented this cell phone, but it didn't have a ring. Now, my connection from Back Bay Station, Jaime, told me LeBron has actually won 4 rings since then. But at least at the time I was following, LeBron James had not won any championship rings. But if we eat the kazayas, we'll be able to be the wearers of our championship ring, of the ring of the mitzvah. And I want to tell a story about eating a kazayas from a person who we all know. One Yontif, before the Millers moved to Baltimore, I was at the Millers for a Yontif Suda, Pesach, during the day. It's true, it wasn't the Seder, but the same halach of kazayas applies if a person wants to fulfill the mitzvah of lechem mishnah, of eating over 2 loaves of bread. A person is obligated to eat a kazayas. It's not a rule from the Torah, but it is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So I distinctly remember one time at the start of the Suda, Rabbi Miller's youngest daughter held up a piece of matzah to her father, and she said, "Is this a kazayas?" I still remember this because when this young girl, who was not more than a year or 2 above Bas Mitzvah, felt it was so important to eat a kazayas. One, how Rabbi Miller instilled in his family the importance of eating a kazayas, and 2, how the Rav's daughter was makabel, how she accepted the importance of eating a kazayas. That message stuck out for me. If a person who's just a year or 2 above Bas Mitzvah, a small person, can eat a kazayas, then hopefully we can eat a kazayas as well. And lastly, we don't want to be like the person in the Avera song who says the following, who says, "I eat the matzah less than a kazayas." We don't want to be that person. We want to complete the mitzvah, wear our championship ring, and eat the matzah to a kazayas on the first night of Pesach.
And fly like an eagle.
Fly like an eagle. Does anyone have any comments about the section of matzah? Yes.
Is a kazayas what a sheet of matzah is?
Well, if a person, it really is hard to give a specific measurement for a kazayas because different matzahs are baked different thickness. The matzahs that Rabbi Katzenstein sells, usually a third plus, and the other thing is that there are different measurements of a kazayas. There's a kazayas according to Tosfos, and there's a kazayas according to the Rambam. The kazayas of Tosfos is more stringent. The kazayas of the Rambam is less stringent. But the Rabbi Katzenstein matzahs, if a person would want to fulfill the stringent view, would eat a third of a round matzah for matzah on the first night of Pesach. And that would fulfill the stringent view.
Yeah, thank you.
And then according to the lenient view, for Rabbi Katzenstein matzahs is about 1/6 of a round matzah. So Eli Malach is bringing up the point about eating 2 kazesim, but the way my Rav explained it to me is that if a person wants to eat 2 kazesim, then you can use the smaller shear of a kazayas. So it's really like 1 big kazayas or 2 small kazesim. It really comes out to be the same thing. Okay, thank you. And at the end of the Seder, Rabbi Katzin dances by Lashana Haba in Yerushalayim. Next year, maybe in Yerushalayim. his son, Rav David Natanel, thinks the reason for the dance is because we're just so happy after having fulfilled all the mitzvahs of the Seder, after having cleaned our houses, brought in the kosher Pesach items, taken out the chametz, um, bought the matzah, spent money, used our bodies, drank the 4 cups of wine, eaten the matzah to a gazais, eaten the mar. We're just so happy that we just want to start dancing. That's why Rabbi Katzin dances by Lashana Haba Yerushalayim. We have a Chag kosher v'sameach, a kosher and joyful Chag, and may our observance of Pesach in a kosher and joyful way, as our having a Chag kosher v'sameach, be as chutz for ourselves, our families, our communities, people who we know, who need refuahs and yeshuas, who need salvations. We need refuah shlema to get better. And for those of us, and for those in Eretz Israel who we're davening for, I'll bring down Rabbi Shes's list from Young Israel for the chayalim, the soldiers. They should be able to come home soon, B'ez Hashem, in time for the Seder. The chatzufim, the captives, hopefully they should be able to come home in time for the Seder. The pitzuim, the injured one, should have a refuah shlema, and the ezrachim, the natives of Eretz Israel, should be able to live with simcha menuchsa nefesh and without fear. And I'll add a 5th one from Rabbi Katzin, the B'nai Torah who are fighting the Milchamta Shel Torah, who are on the front lines with their Amilas B'Torah, should also have the kaiches to be able to fight the Milchama. Chag kosher v'sameach.